Hi, I'm Dédé Wilson, and I want to talk to you a little bit about measuring dry ingredients by volume as opposed to weight. Most American cookbooks will suggest measuring cups. You'll see measurements for a half a cup of sugar or a cup of flour and what have you. Now, the problem with measuring by volume is that it can really vary depending on how you do the measuring. I know this sounds really confusing, but the best advice I can give you is that if you're working from a cookbook, to go to the beginning of the cookbook, and usually there's some sort of chapter or section called How to Use This Book or something like that. In my books, I will explain to you in that part that the way I measure dry ingredients is the dip and sweep method. And you'll see why that's called shortly. The first thing we need to talk about is tools, because not all measuring cups and spoons are equal in terms of their quality and how exacting that they are made. These are my measuring cups. You may wonder why there are so many here. Well, let me take you through it. I've got an 1/8 cup measure. This is equal to 2 tablespoons. This also happens to be the perfect measuring size for a coffee scoop. It equals a coffee scoop. We have a 1/4 cup, a 1/3 cup, a 1/2 cup. Here's where it gets a little interesting. A 2/3 cup and a 3/4 cup. Now, those might not be cups that you have, and I'll get to that in a moment. A 1 cup, a 1 1/2, a 1 3/4, and a 2 cup. Now, the reason why I have these odd sizes, like the 3/4 cup, is because if you have a measurement called for in a recipe, that let's say it says 3/4 of a cup of sugar. Chances are, with the set that you have at home, what you would need to do is you would need to take the 1/4 and the 1/2, and of course, added together, this does make 3/4 of a cup. The problem is that every time you go and measure by volume, there really can be a margin of error. And so if you have to measure twice to get one measurement, you're really expanding upon the times that you could make a mistake and end up with the wrong amount of product. So investing in good measuring tools once, they'll last you a lifetime if you take care of them. I think it really makes sense to get the odd sizes, and also to make sure that whatever measuring cups you're buying, that they're really good quality. The oval ones that I have here are made by Pro. It's a company I love for their measuring cups. The standards are exact. They use standards for weights and measures so that this 3/4 cup is this 3/4 cup. Now listen, think about this for a moment. Let's say you have your mom's or your grandmother's old set, and maybe it's been rattling around a drawer for generations, and it's got dents. Well, that measurement's not exact anymore. Or maybe you picked up your set at a dollar store or at a tag sale, and we don't know where they were made. Maybe they were not made by a company that takes standards into such detail. It's really important to buy good quality. So the oval ones are Pro, and then the other ones that I have here I got through King Arthur Flour. I love these as well. So definitely pays to look into these, invest in them, and have them at hand. Now I'm going to show you how to dip and sweep, and this is, as I said, one way to measure dry ingredients by volume. It is the way I like to do it. First, we have our dry ingredients. This is all-purpose flour. I like to keep my dry ingredients in airtight containers. These lids actually have a silicone seal on the inside, so they're nice and airtight. It'll keep my flour nice and fresh. You can even hear it. Okay, so the first thing that I do is I whisk the dry ingredient around a little bit. This isn't the same as sifting. I'm just getting any big lumps out of there, because while it's been sitting, if it's been sitting for a long time, the flour can compact and you would get too much flour in your measuring spoon, in your measuring cup or spoon. So the dip and sweep. We need our cup. Now this is a 1/2 cup, so we're pretending that the recipe is calling for a 1/2 cup of flour. You want to use the exact same size measuring cup as the amount called for in the recipe. So if it called for 3/4 of a cup of flour, that's why you would need that 3/4 cup. And then you need something with a nice flat edge. This is an icing spatula. You could also use the back of a chef knife, or you could also use the back of a butter knife. This is for the dip, this is for the sweep. So we go in, this is the dip. Now when you dip, you want to have a mounded amount of product, because then you're going to sweep. And the sweep is just taking that straight edge tool straight against the top of the measuring cup, and now we have exactly a 1/2 cup of flour, exactly what we want. So I'll show you again. We go in. This is the dip. We want an extra large amount so that we have something to sweep off. Perfectly level with the top of the measuring cup, and there's our 1/2 cup of flour. Weighing absolutely is more precise, but many cookbooks don't give you that option. If the cookbook is only giving you volume measurements like 1/2 cup of flour and it says dip and sweep, then this is what you want to do. Now with brown sugar, the recipe is going to say a 1/2 cup of firmly packed brown sugar, or a 1/2 cup of a lightly packed brown sugar. And that's not a dip and sweep method, but there is a certain technique for measuring brown sugar. So I'm going to show you what that is. So here we have the brown sugar, again in an airtight container, so it always stays nice and moist. I'm pretending again that the recipe is calling for a 1/2 cup of firmly packed brown sugar. So what I'm doing is I have my 1/2 cup. I'm going to go in and get a whole lot, but I'm going to use my hands to literally firmly pack it down. I want to pack it down as firmly as possible so it's even with the top. You can do that part with your finger, or to be more precise, if you have that straight edge around, there we go. There might be a few lumps in the brown sugar, but now look, not quite compact enough. See that? If it says firmly packed, it literally means get as much brown sugar as you can in there. And there we go. There's our 1/2 cup of firmly packed light brown sugar. Now let's talk a little bit about measuring spoons. Now you may just have one set of spoons, but just like I have a couple of sets of measuring cups, I also have a couple of sets of measuring spoons. Now you notice that these are red on the tip. I actually put that red there. It's just nail polish. The reason why I did that is because the red draws my eye to it. This is the set I use all the time. These are the standard measures. This set comes with an 1/8 of a teaspoon, 1/4 of a teaspoon, a 1/2 a teaspoon, 1 teaspoon, and a tablespoon. So this is your standard set. This set actually has something called a pinch, which is smaller than an 1/8 of a teaspoon. This one also has the 1/8 teaspoon, so that one's redundant, but that's okay. It has a 2/3 teaspoon, it has a 1.5 teaspoon, and it has a 2 teaspoon. And again, just like with measuring cups, if you have an odd measurement, like let's say your recipe calls for 1.5 teaspoons of cocoa powder or something like that, it'd be better if you had this and you could just go in with that 1.5 teaspoon size and measure it all at once. So just like with the flour and the cups, we use a dip and sweep method for dry ingredients. Now this is baking powder. Double acting baking powder is the kind that I use. I use a couple of different brands. I've recently been using this Davis baking powder mostly because I love the container. Look at the container top. It actually comes all ready for me to dip in there and then sweep against this top, which I love. So if our recipe is calling for a teaspoon of baking powder, I would simply go in with a generous amount, sweep it, and there's my measurement. So again, it's just like we were doing with the measuring cups. You dip in, you make sure you get plenty, and then you sweep across the top. And then we have our measurement. So I hope the whole technique of dipping and sweeping dry ingredients is making more sense to you now. And again, just to really reiterate the point, I highly suggest you invest in really good quality dry measuring equipment. It makes sense to get the odd sizes like the 3/4 and the 2/3. And the same goes with the measuring spoons. It's nice to have the standard set as well as the extra set. So if your cookbook calls for a dip and sweep, certainly do that. If it says something else, if it says gently spoon the flour into the cup and then sweep off, then by all means follow those directions, because you really could get a different amount of dry ingredients by doing that. The trick is to use the technique that the person who developed the recipe used, and that way you will be as close to perfection as you can get, and your desserts will be fabulous.